welcome everybody to the August meeting of the Indicio Identity Community Meetup. My name is Helen Garneau. I do marketing at Indicio. These events are part of Indicio's public benefit mission to help expand the community use, understanding of verifiable credentials, decentralized identity, kind of all things remotely related to those topics. Whether it's open source, open standards, you name it, we try to have different conversations about use cases, implementations, tools, folks that are doing interesting things in the community. So always happy to have a range of folks join us, even if you don't know anything about the topic. So welcome everybody. But with that said, I will hand it over to Trevor Butterworth to get us kicked off, and over to you.
Thank you, Helen. So let me introduce our two guests today and ask them to tell you a little bit about themselves. And I will start with Dr. Chase Cunningham, or Dr. Zero Trust.
Sure. So thanks. Background, I'm retired Navy. I was a chief cryptologist. Then I went to work for NSA for a while and wrote a bunch of their curriculum for computer network exploitation. Then I was at Forrester for a bit and launched a bunch of the ZT stuff into the market. So I guess I probably owe everyone here an apology, because all that ZT stuff that you're dealing with constantly now is kind of the result of a lot of that work. And since then, I've been a consultant, doing a bunch of work for different orgs, and published books, and working on a thing called DemoForce. And I just keep my fingers in lots of pots in the cybersecurity space. So I appreciate being invited here for this one.
Thank you, Chase. Over to you, Will.
Hi, everybody. Coming from Sarasota, Florida today. My first couple career eras were in government contracting, one working for a large systems integrator on the federal civilian side, and then did a lean bootstrapped startup that got pretty decent size, mostly in the U.S. national defense and intelligence area. I exited that in around 2019, and today I help founders build businesses. I help venture capital groups identify and do diligence for new companies, and I enjoy helping early career employees for these companies, just to help them out in their beginning. Happy to be here, and really happy to be, especially with Dr. Zero Trust. When I was doing my succession planning, I just got immersed in everything that you wrote, Chase, and much of my knowledge comes from you. So appreciate it, and thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
So it may be old news to some, or it's probably news to others, but to get this started off, Chase, could you give us a brief history of why everyone now talks about zero trust as the way to manage cybersecurity?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of times I like to ask people to kind of begin with is when was the first instance that we knew that the perimeter-based model of security was categorically going to fail? Most folks would go back like 10, 15 years and they would talk about Google or Aurora or those things, whatever. Really, when you think about it, it's the fall of Troy. Think about what happened at Troy, which that was 1,000+ years ago. We had a wall, a firewall. We had stuff on the outside, which was on the open. We had a group inside. What did they do? They went and grabbed something. They brought it past the wall because they poked a hole in it. Bad guys deployed out from inside, set up a beachhead, burned the town to the ground. You wind up with a crappy movie with Brad Pitt and a weird accent. So like, that's really how far back this goes. As far as zero trust goes, people also think that this is something brand new that Zscaler came up with 10 days ago. No, John Kindervag, who's a great friend of mine and a great friend of you folks at Indicio, he would say that he actually got the concept for this from a poem written by Rudyard Kipling in 1902. Most familiar are not, really aware that that goes that far back. But if you look it up, go look it up. It's called Rudyard Kipling's 6 Serving Men. And it talks about who, what, where, how, when, right? So those are things that we all deal with in zero trust and cybersecurity. And that's what we're trying to get to here. Let me show you a couple of things real quickly, because I also like to dispel some of the shenanigans that are put out by marketing firms and research groups. So let me bring this up here. And hopefully everybody sees my slides. And if I can get them into actual PowerPoint view. Cool.
Hi.
Oops. Yep. You don't want that. We'll pause that. But anyway, so look, this goes back to Kindervag's first session, 2004. All right, 2004. That's 20 years ago. ZTX ecosystem report that I published, that was in 2016. COVID hit 2019, 2020. Like, this has been a 20+ year evolution of ZT. This didn't just happen. It wasn't something that Zscaler came up with, whatever. Like, there has been a lot of research, a lot of work laid ground here to make this stuff real. And just so you know, like, that's one of John's publications that actually came out to kind of start the formal ball rolling. So he ideated on this back in 2004, starts getting published, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on from there. This was my paper that I published that kind of formalized what Zero Trust looked like and where it went. And this was what kickstarted all of Forrester's formalization of that. So that was pretty cool. And just FYI, it was 2018, like it was a while ago. So this isn't something that we just started with. And then we started doing waves, which I hated and was one reason I quit Forrester, because waves are waves and whatever. But anyway, there's also a lot of folks that say ZT and SASE are like new and they're intertwined and they're the same thing. No, Zero Trust has been around longer than SASE. SASE is something that Gartner came up with when they started losing market share to ZT. I was literally in the meeting between Gartner people and Forrester people, and there was talk about what was going on, and Gartner was freaking out, and they came up with the SASE thing. And honestly, if you put 100 CISOs in a room and told me to find 10 that would go into a boardroom and say they're SASE, I would give you $1,000, because that's like the honey boo boo of cybersecurity. Like, no one wants to say they're SASE. And then lastly, you know, just for folks to understand, like, the real MQ that matters here in the context of all the Zero Trust stuff and security strategy, you want to be upper right because you're intelligent and effective. You don't want to be following the herd on these other things. Like, you have decades of proof all the way back, if you really want to argue it, to the fall of Troy, that we knew what we were doing was going to fail. And why would you choose to engage in something that has categorically failed? Like, we have oodles of research that proves that that stuff is, it wasn't for lack of effort. It wasn't for lack of investment. It wasn't because we were doing the wrong things. We just didn't deal with it the right way. And ZT deals with it the right way. So there's your kind of crash course on the 1,000-year history of Zero Trust.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the sort of, you know, Zero Trust obviously implies you shouldn't trust any entity in your system or trying to access your system. But what is the broader context of this? Clearly, John saw a significant problem with security back in 2004. Give us a sense of where we've gone with that security problem, the data breaches, the phishing, the extent of the losses, just to give a sense of how much of a problem this is.
Yeah, I mean, I saw some research published recently that said that if you looked at cybercrime and cyber warfare as a GDP, a nation state, it would be the third largest nation state GDP on the planet, behind China and Russia. So, like, that's big. Anytime you see an organization where they make more money than digital pornography, to be perfectly frank, like, that's a real issue. It's huge. So it's a big space. It's getting exponentially more complex. And to be perfectly frank, I think a lot of the issue that we face now is that most of us that are doing the work, we've accepted that something is fundamentally wrong with the methodology that was preached to us, and we were all certified with, myself included. But now where we're at is the change either has to happen at the brain level, like thinking about it, and goes into implementation, or like, you literally know you're rolling the dice and hoping it doesn't come up snake eyes. And sooner or later it does. And you have, again, decades of proof. It's not, I mean, there's banks that spend $500 million a year on cyber that got owned. It's not about money. It's not about tech. It's about smart approaches to the problem.
So just to bring in Will now, so what was your first perception of Zero Trust? And did you come at it from a sort of sense that, hey, we have to do something about the problem of cyber insecurity? What was, you know, what from your the position you were in the tech world, what was your initial reaction and evolving understanding of ZT?
So I came in relatively late. So at the time, I'm a leader in a company of a few hundred people. We're a government contractor. Our main customers are Department of Defense. Their emphasis was on insider threat at the time. So zero trust was just coming in the vernacular. I'd heard the term. I'd been spoiled with all the marketing hype and point solutions on zero trust. I was like, I know there's something here, but I just don't get it. And I started reading the Forrester work, and I can't remember the exact publication when I really got it. I went, wow, this is really important here. Our customers are asking for it. How do we elevate programs of record to address this? And I just started digging in more and more, and just led to a whole lot of things after that.
Let's say, so both of you come, one of you is coming at this from the sort of tech businessman side of things, the other is coming at it from the cybersecurity kind of things. So if Will goes to you, Chase, and says, okay, I want to implement a zero trust architecture, what's the next? What are the steps that you have to go through in order to operationalize sort of never trust, always verify?
Well, I mean, I think the focus needs to shift away from just trying to bolt on more tech for the sake of more tech. If you look at, like, I think that the Verizon DBIR, the Mandate M-Trends reports, those to me are like biblical references that I read every year. Probably says a lot about my life that those are biblical references, but that's another story. Really, what I'm saying here is that if you look at what goes on in those reports, where is the primary avenue of compromise? It is via credentials, it's via IAM, it's via mismanagement of abilities within the network, like those things. So why would you focus other places? Now, I would agree, someone waving a magic wand and saying IAM is a simple problem to solve is lying to you. But the reality of it is, if you're going to focus your time and efforts, you focus on where the adversary literally is telling you they're going to attack, and you do those things first. So to me, I start with IAM, I start with users, I start with phishing, those things, and then I work my way from there. The network is the network. I can't do a whole lot to really stop where electrons move, but I can definitely fix people's crappy passwords.
So would you, so in all of this, and obviously, Indicio pushes, believes, and markets verifiable credentials as a key solution to implementing zero trust, because it's the other side of the equation. It enables you to cryptographically verify identity. How do you see verifiable credentials sorting out, how would you contrast the verifiable credential solution with the IAM solutions, and that everybody's got a ZT product? How would you make that contrast? What do you see as different and important to take away?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a big fan of verifiable credentials and the use of the ledger to kind of do this stuff. I mean, I run nodes on Indicio's network, and the reason I do that is I think that there's a better way to actually approach this problem. So, I mean, we live in a world where the majority of things that I want to and need to do, I can get through my phone. Why is it so hard for me to have a verifiable persona credential within a digital system? It's very much like when you have your passport. If you've taken a flight, I think zero trust aligns very well to kind of the process we all take to get on an airplane. My passport's been sent to me by a government agency. I had to go to the post office to get it. They've checked my social, my, all those background things, whatever. Then it talks to the airline systems and it lets you know that you're okay to board and blah, blah, blah. And along the way, I have a couple of checks before I get there. And if I get any of that wrong, I either get out, go back, or maybe get arrested. And then I'm able to, deal with it on the far end. So we understand conceptually that the binding of a human identity or any identity, entity, whatever, to verifiable credentials makes sense. IAM, part of the reason why it is still so problematic is because it is so bifurcated. We keep trying to solve it with Active Directory this and password that and manager here and whatever, when in reality, I'm not, as long as I'm on this side of the grass, I'm going to be in the digital space and I will need some sort of ability to access information and data and whatever. Why does it have to be so scattershot and bifurcated? Why can't it just be, I am who I am, it's tied to all these other things, we know that it's legit, go on about your day and do good things?
Will, how do you see verifiable credentials sort of enabling a much broader implementation of zero trust? And I noted a report recently said that it's not just an individual company that has to be build in resilience here. It's that I think there was a survey of SMEs. 41% said all their problems were caused by other parties in their supply chain having inferior cybersecurity. So how do we, I mean, obviously, I think VC is a solution, but how do we go about implementing a much broader sort of, a real verifiable identity solution to the always verify part of the ZT architecture?
Well, there's a business element to this. And I love frameworks and structures. I think they're great for conversation and helping. Zero trust architecture, certainly a very good one. But there's a business of IT. There's a group called Technology Business Management Foundation. And they came about because CIOs and CFOs didn't really have a language to talk about the business of IT. ITs were big cost centers. And security and cybersecurity are a big part of that. Back to Chase's comment on IAM, you look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework, that is a framework for 200 or so attack vectors that bad guys use. Probably 20–25% of those have to do with identity and credential access management. So there's a business to zero trust, and when you combine pure zero trust architecture that Chase helped develop and beats the drum on every single day, and you combine it with verifiable continuous verification through decentralized identity and verifiable credentials, there's some real business magic that just comes out of that. It's not just the techie stuff. And when you elevate the conversation within a C-suite to the business of it, a lot more informed answers come out. Chase mentioned some of his Bibles. One that I keep going back to is out of NIST. There's a lot of smart people at NIST. They have a special publication on zero trust architecture, SP 800-207, I think it is. It's updated every few years. If you look at, I'll probably get the section wrong. I think it's 3.1.1. And so buried in this beautiful piece of work that I go back to is it talks about enhanced identity governance. And that is really the heart of verifiable credentials mashed up with zero trust. And if you pull that thread, and I'm hoping that at some point, that NIST document is updated. If you pull that thread far enough, some simple formulas come out. And even that document talks about a trust algorithm. It talks about it from a techie perspective, but there is real business model embedded in that when you do this mashup.
Interesting. So, so you see, Will, that there's a huge opportunity here to create a sort of, to create a much more frictionless authentication for the entire digital landscape, and that will have a corresponding financial benefit in terms of less money spent on cybersecurity and greater prosperity through the ability to have sort of seamless trust. Is that how you envisage this sort of the economics of zero trust evolving?
Yeah, that's exactly where I see this going. There is an economics of trust. There's a great book back in 2008, the speed of trust. It was written by Stephen M.R. Covey. He is the son of Stephen Covey, who a lot of people my age will remember the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The speed of trust, it's written back in 2008, so consider the time frame. It's written mostly towards human trust, but the thesis is really strong and simple, and it says this about trust. Trust has 2 components. There's speed and cost. These are the 2 components that are easily translatable into business. Speed is the processing speed. If you're delivering a platform and services to customers, it's how fast that happens. If it's cost is obviously avoiding cost or saving cost. So when trust goes up, speed goes up and costs go down. When trust goes down, speed goes down and costs go up. And, Indicio does a lot of work in the travel industry. So just think about travel before 9/11 and after 9/11. So 9/11 hits, trust plummets. So it was a terrible time in the world and terrible time in the US. Lots of things happened after that, but trust went way down. So what happened after that? Well, speed went way down. Just across a border, that went way down. Your identity verification went way down. And what happened? Costs had to go up, just out of necessity. So there's this simple formula between trust, speed, and cost. And I just go back to the mashup between continuous verification with the way Indicio is approaching it and the pure zero trust architecture.
There's some interesting points going on in the chat that I want to bring up, but I'd like Chase, if you could respond to some of that, and especially as okay, so a company implements a ZT architecture. What kind of benefits do they see? I mean, how does it deliver in the real world?
Well, I mean, just like any other practice, it's going to take, time, and it takes effort to get to this spot. This is a marathon. It's not something you wake up and do. Any vendor that says they just turn on zero trust is kind of full of it. So know that. But the reality of it is, I mean, I've consulted on a bunch of these zero trust migrations. Good example, I worked with a cruise line that had, I think it was 7 CISOs in 5 years, and they had almost 60 security solutions in their technology suite. After we plotted it out and actually put a program in place and a strategy, they went from 58-ish to down to about 11. So they saved like $3 million a year on spend. So, the thing that actually matters to folks is money, is compliance, is being able to, legally do business. ZT, if implemented correctly, is a strategic approach to getting to that step. I also think that folks should realize a lot of people have an issue about corporate, like whatever, calling something zero trust as far as a strategy. It doesn't matter. It's your strategy. You can call it cyber tiddlywinks. It doesn't matter. But the whole thing is, do you have a strategy in place that deals with the reality of the issues, that everyone understands where the end state is going to go? So like that's something you should take away from this as well.
So interesting in the chat, Brian is bringing up some issues around AI. I don't know whether I'll let Brian, if Brian wants to, actually talk about them live, you're more than welcome to. But before you do, there was a recent survey carried out, I think, by the World Economic Forum, which found that I think only 1 out of every 10 sort of businesses thought that AI would help them defend against attack rather than help the attackers attack. So where are we with AI, and especially deepfake AI? And Brian, well, you've made some points in the chat. Turn the mic over to you to talk a little bit more about what you're saying.
Thank you for having me. I do want to call out, I love Chase's comment. Privacy died when we plugged in, right? agree 100%. We all have a digital fingerprint out there, but I wonder if people don't realize how much privacy they don't have anymore since they plugged in. And a lot of that privacy that's been given up is like on the dark web, and they may not even know it's there. And, you know, and there's breaches that happen like we just experienced, right? With all the social security numbers that are out there. I mean, let's just pretty much assume the threat actors know more about us than we know they know, right? And then when you think about them grabbing a tool like AI to start becoming more efficient in their attacks, then you ask, well, what's our defense? And our defense is really, well, we have to use AI to defend ourselves. And if we're so concerned with our own privacy because we're worried the threat actors might have it when they probably already do, that we're not willing to give up our own privacy to our own AI that's protecting us, our AI is going to be hindered in understanding how to properly protect us against the things that the AI threat actors already know, right? And so that's kind of what I'm seeing in the future. I do agree. I love this conversation. Trust is a big issue right now, so I don't want to derail the fact that that's not an issue or discount it. But I feel like when we're in the future of AI, 5 years from now, we're expecting, you know, AGI, where supposedly it will be as smart as a human or smarter and be able to even train itself, right? So right now with AI, part of the reason why it doesn't work as well as it could for these threat actors is they have to know how to properly train it. So if they're not experts in training their AI, it's going to hinder their ability. But the minute AI can train itself, we're going to see a huge, you know, increase in the sophistication of these types of attacks is what I'm seeing.
Well, I think we're already seeing very sophisticated attacks by, you know, AI faking your corporate colleague's voice, and then getting you to, you know, then there was an attack where a phishing attack where they used send an SMS link with this guy's voice at the end saying, "Hey, it's open enrollment on our health insurance you know, benefits," and some poor soul put his, you know, went to the site and put his data in, and then they went back to his phone and got his MFA, and so the whole system is already being tortured by a much greater level of fakery. And obviously, I think verifiable credentials are able to handle that, you know, especially around if you use, you know, biometric templates in the creation of a verifiable identity. So you hold your own biometric data, and you're able to prove, you know, there are multiple routes to proving that you are the person at the end of the interaction. But Chase, how is AI affecting your perspective? You know, obviously address what Brian said, but how is it affecting your thoughts on implementing actual solutions?
Well, I mean, I think one thing to immediately take away is that the marketing side around this, that they even call it AI, is actually skewing things, because people that aren't technologists, that aren't mathematicians, they think that this is HAL, right? Like it woke up and decided to do stuff on its own, and they're just kind of, these are programs and mathematics and algorithms and systems that are built to do those things. They're ingest and response kind of factories. And the point I'm making there is that it's a tool like anything else. It's just how it's used by whichever group to do that thing is going to be most applicable. And I think that honestly, the implications of AI in this particular era mean to me that no organization has a valid reason anymore to say that they can't keep up with cyber or technology or whatever. You shouldn't be doing a lot of these things with human scale. You should be doing them with machine scale. But it needs to be applied the correct way. Otherwise, you know, you are going to, and unfortunately for us, we have to play by the rules. Adversaries don't, so they can get really creative with the ways that they're doing things, and we're seeing that already.
Could you unpack that a little bit of what you mean by machine scale rather than human scale? What does that mean for the average person?
So I mean, you've got all these problems you're trying to solve for, firewall rules and IAM stuff and Active Directory management and blah blah blah. Like there's the stack of problems is pretty big. Ricky the intern with a spreadsheet is not going to be able to keep up with those things and make it actually manageable. However, a bot or an AI powered something or another that you can point towards that problem. They're built for that. They do it really well. Matter of fact, I have a bot that I built on GPT-4 for me that helps me with my research, and it makes me operate like I have 3 or 4 research assistants. So like that is what this stuff is built for. To Brian's point on privacy, I mean, I think privacy is super important. I think it's a fundamental human right. However, privacy kind of fell apart when we started hooking ourselves into electrons and companies started making money off of us.
Will, any thoughts on this particular angle?
It brings, somebody put a comment in the thread, I can't remember who it was, but it takes me, they put the comment in about, this zero trust is data centric. And I don't think that gets necessarily talked enough. AI obviously is about data. It's data monetization in machine learning form. So I think, and I would love to hear Chase's views on this a little bit more. Maybe Chase talk a little bit about the data centricity, why it was so important in the original architecture for zero trust, and arc that all the way to today in today's AI world.
Yeah, so if you go back to the original sort of drafts around ZT, right, the no more chewy centers piece, there was a big focus on data and then working your way outward from there. What has kind of been accepted as not a flaw, but just an anomaly in that approach is data as we deal with it today is very, very ethereal, very dynamic. If I talk to 3 different orgs today and I say, define your data for me, that's of value, I'll get 3 different answers from 3 different orgs. And if there's 3 people there, I get 3 more. So the ability to say with real veracity, like this is the data that is critical, et cetera, usually you can get kind of a sledgehammer approach to it, but to be that scalpel level, I don't think that currently is very doable in the market. However, if we jump the shark there and move into where we're at now with the solutions around like verifiable creds and identity and ledgers and those things, I can know with real accuracy who's doing what, where they're going, what they're touching, the whole log of events, et cetera. And then I can vector in on that. So I think that the original idea that John had around data as kind of your first starting point was great as a concept, but when you actually talk to practitioners, it's very, very hard to do. If you kind of flip it on its head a little bit and say, well, if we accept that as far as we know, it's humans and machines that are accessing those resources, how do we control that access? That's where you begin to get a handle on it.
Could I add something to that?
Sure, yep, go
Just from some of our experiences kind of getting into AI and working with clients, what I'm finding, no matter what size business you are, whether it's small business or enterprise, there's not really any one person or one team that understands where all the data is for the company and how it's potentially being managed and secured. It tends to be in an enterprise, you tend to see siloed IT departments, right, that have a focus on one thing. And then even the CISO or the CIO, they're managing all those departments, but they're not really understanding where all the data is for the company because they haven't been asked to do that, or they haven't felt the need to do that because things are working the way they're working. And after I learned about AI and then dug back into security frameworks, I realized quickly that even the MSP channel has been kind of trained in this user and device centric security model because that's really easy to sell, right? You can sell anything based on users and devices when it comes to security. The minute you have to sell security that focuses on data, that's a huge mountain to climb. You have to get a lot of the right people in the room that even understand where the data is. And you have to really create a team or at least one person that it takes ownership over understanding what that looks like now and how it might look in the future, especially to properly make use of AI.
Any comments on that? Or we have a question from Kyle in the chat with regards to zero trust. What are your thoughts on presentations of no attributes or zero knowledge proofs? Is it feasible in a use case like air travel or other use cases?
I mean, zero knowledge is, I think that there's some value to that concept in the space, but really, I mean, the zero knowledge thing, somewhere along the way, there is data that sits in some lake that is used for those purposes. So it's not just like zero trust, right? You're never going to get to zero trust. You're going to get towards manageable, that type of whatever. I think that it's potentially very interesting to see that as part of the overall play. I think personally, healthcare and airline travel and pharmacies, like those things that we do where honestly we're sick of having to like re-enter the same information 15 times to validate who we are. I think that that is where that whole place applies most directly. Like for me, because I'm a veteran, the VA, even though I was retired military, like they've known me for decades, I still have to fill out the same stupid paperwork every time I go to the same doctor for the same thing, rather than just walk in, tap my phone, my verifiable cred does its stuff and pulls my medical record. It's an exercise in kind of past operations that's really plaguing things, not where we're going forward. I think the airlines are aware of this. It's just one of those things where there's hesitancy to put another new cool technology in the space because there's been plenty of that and not all of it has panned out.
So you've been involved in discussions with the White House on zero trust as a sort of national strategy. Can you talk about, you know, at a very high level, or, well, depending on, you may not be able to talk much about it at all, but where are we going, at least in the United States or versus Europe, in terms of zero trust as a national strategy?
Yeah, so the White House published the executive order on ZT that basically said, here's what companies have to do, especially the DoD. And this is kind of a weird place because like Will was talking about, typically we look to business to be the leader and then government follows that and kind of tries to play catch up. Here in security, for a whole bunch of reasons, the government is kind of in charge or in front of this. So the fact that the White House, the executive office, pushed their zero trust mandate out is a big deal. The DoD is planning on hitting what they call an instantiated version or operational level of ZT by 2030. Now, you think that that's a long time. I mean, this is a battleship we're trying to turn with a wooden tiller. It takes time. They've invested about $2.5 billion into its total so far, and that's going to keep playing out. I think 2027 is their next kind of guide and check that has to happen. Australia has also moved to a whole of government approach to zero trust. So like you're seeing this kind of trickle down effect of, I don't know, trickle down cyber or trickle down ZT. And it's coming up globally. So I think you're going to see more of it. We are actively in, I've sent active legislative drafts up to the Hill about tax credits for organizations around cyber that are aligned with the zero trust memorandum. So we're trying to change from so much stick because the stick hasn't worked to kind of carrot-ish sticky, I guess you could call it. And we'll get there over time.
So I was about to say, what are the blockers that you've seen? If you were, what do you advise, broadly speaking, a company that wants to implement a zero trust approach, and what are the blockers that they're likely to encounter?
Well, the first blocker that you're going to encounter is people going, "Oh no, you're saying we don't trust our employees." Like, no, that's not what we're saying. You can trust your employees, go out, have a drink with them or whatever else. That's not what this is about. This is about removing trust from digital systems kind of by default. So I would make sure that everybody understands exactly what your zero trust plan is, be able to articulate that. And then the second thing is really look at, well, what do we need to do business? Where can we get rid of the fat? Do we know that there's an easy avenue of compromise? I always tell people in my engagements, if you're not willing to do a red team to start your plan for ZT, you're not ready to do ZT. And the reason for that is if you're not willing to stand in the ring and take a punch in the face, what good is your strategy when that punch in the face does occur? So I think personally, it's a red team to begin with, and then you plot your defenses around what the red team found. And that, funny enough, that's literally how the government's going about it. They just wrapped up a 6-week red team against zero trust environments to come back and see if whether or not they were in a place to start putting those policies in place.
So Will, it would sound that red teaming, sounds quite the organizational challenge for society, business as the business as a whole. But what do you think of Chase's idea of the carrot of tax cuts to implement, or tax credits to implement zero trust? I mean, there's got to be, what do you think of that idea? And would that also in effect destroy the IAM market, because there's so many companies selling zero trust solutions? Wouldn't a kind of, if everybody adopted verifiable credentials, that would be and there was a tax credit or tax incentive to do so. That would really change. That would be significant change. But I'm curious as to your thoughts on those thoughts.
I love that idea. And, back to Chase's point about, the government, at least in the US and Australia, leading this. Obviously, government plays a part, industry plays a part too. But, we as, citizens also play a part. I love the tax idea. If I think about just the economics of digital trust, you have trust taxes and you have trust dividends. You got this carrot and stick, and when you put them both together, it creates a great balance. And that's where I think the business world really has an opportunity to step up on the trust dividend side. And if you look at it through a business person's perspective, if you're looking at your bottom line, or a CFO, if you're looking at your bottom line and you can flip a tax to a dividend, that is like a 2x gain to your bottom line. So in terms of cybersecurity, Chase, you and I have been in a few discussions. You mentioned, how much cost savings certain of your projects have gained just by eliminating complexity. They are eliminating trust taxes, and they're actually gaining in trust dividends. So I love the thought of introducing, tax incentives as part of the public sector.
Interestingly, Brian brings up some interesting points in the chat, that, part of the problem is that implementing the security is a fundamental layer in our digital sort of physical world. But it's an expensive layer, and the incentive is actually to cut corners in order to save money, rather than to implement the solution that will actually save money or sort of mitigate risk in the long term. Chase, what's your initial sort of view of the IAM and security landscape from 40,000 feet?
I mean, I think in general, it's been really good for the VCs and the folks that invest in that space. No offense to VC people, but it's a market that I liken it very much to fishing training. Like, it's kind of an insolvable problem, and it's a great place to treat symptoms, but not have a real cure, because you can make, investments, and then somebody acquires that company, and then you get your payout and whatever, and buy another Lambo or whatever those folks do. So I think that's where things have gone slightly awry in the overall market. We've created this self-licking ice cream cone of misery where we continue to invest in things when we have seen that it doesn't really make that much difference on the far end. I mean, if IAM and Active Directory management was, the key that it is supposed to be, we would have solved this portion of cyber like 10, 12 years ago. But there's always new approaches, there's always new changes, there's new technologies, et cetera. It just continues to bifurcate. And if we look at the physics, like the gravity, the pillars of what has to happen in these spaces, we know that we have identities, we know that we have entities, we know that we can verify and validate that those things are what they say they are. Wouldn't it make way more sense to invest and focus there, because it actually solves the problem? But it's problematic for the folks that are sitting on the other side of the equation going, well, wait a minute, we want to grow this IAM thing. It just is, it's counter to logic, which for me is kind of like, I don't know that I agree with that.
Will,
I
do
see
you?
this. Yeah, I see the same thing. I get to see pitches from a number of groups all the time, and of course, there's always the cybersecurity ones, and most of the time, I just eye roll. I can't even get through a whole deck because you know, to Chase's point, I just see the same thing over and over again. And what did you say? Self-licking ice cream cone. That's great. It's true. It is so true. Every once in a while, I see something just a little bit different. We're like, I want to dig a little bit more in that. But when I discovered the approach that Indicio is taking to the market, you know, a component approach, not a platform approach, no vendor lock-in approach, that resonated to what I always heard, you know, public sector customers say that they wanted. It resonates to me in, you know, a future better world where you know, cybersecurity is not you know, the third largest, you know, GDP entity, you know, hopefully in the future. And you know, zero trust as Chase has developed it, and continuous verification as Indicio is offering it to customers is a big part of that, in my view.
So Colton Watkins in the chat says, what I like about verifiable credentials is that if we can trust the data in the credentials, sorry for that little sound going off, I thought I'd muted my Slack, having the data starts to become meaningless unless you have a verifiable credential. So this I think is nicely sums up the combination of decentralization and cryptography. So we are 8 minutes from time. If there are any other questions, now is the time to you know, either raise your hand or put something in the chat. Otherwise, we will move to, I guess, what might be called closing statements. So anybody have anything they want to bring up?
Yeah, let's let Michael go. I've talked too much already. There we go.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much. We have an initiative, a project to create a digital version of what's called the World Citizen Passport, and it's based in Washington, D.C. It's a small nonprofit, but it's been around 70 years. So I'm not the technical lead on the team. I'm more of a designer of business models. But my question is, what is so hard about creating a verified credential? Like I think one of you mentioned, you know, if you can verify someone's identity across multiple metrics, how come you can't have a digital identity that's portable and you can take everywhere and prove who you are and get in where you need to get in and not have to use a username and a password? And what is the big barrier to that?
So I think that the decentralized identity has been talked about for quite a long time as this solution. However, it's only in the last couple of years that we are actually able to implement it. And I'd rather my guest spoke, but we have created with our partner CETA a digital travel credential. It follows the ICAO standards for turning a passport into for a person to turn their passport into a digital credential that is authenticated, and then you combine liveness and biometric checks. And we're seeing a lot of interest in that kind of powerful digital identity. So I think you will be seeing this. And then, of course, the European Union has got behind decentralized identity and verifiable credentials. So I think you're going to see what I think the Gartner is estimating, that in 2026, 500 million people will be making verifiable claims using digital credentials. So I think it's happening. And like many things in tech, it's, painful increment by painful increment, and then all of a sudden.
Let me add one more thing, and
Sure.
let other people ask. Let me add one more thing, right to what you said. I saw that there was a test pilot, like a beta test of a verified identity for like passport for someone traveling from the UK, and I think they flew to Italy. So it seems to me analogous to the global pass system, but more advanced, where they've pre-validated you before you board, and your passport's been verified, your ID's been verified, and it does look like the EU is kind of on the cutting edge of this.
I got to say, we're on the cutting edge because we already did that with Uber.
Thank you.
So we put people from Canada and the US were able to get pre-authorization, and crossing the border is a matter of seconds. They just look in a face pod and boom, they're through. And it's also a fantastic way of, although requires more explanation, it's a fantastic way of managing that kind of biometric data in a privacy-preserving way. So we're seeing a lot of interest from airlines and governments in this. I think you're going to see this roll out. And then I think you're going to see, I think a lot of people will follow from that and then see how easy this technology is to use as an alternative to passwords and logins for accessing systems.
Can I add one final thing? Is that we want to align with the United Nations, which has Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which identity, like I think somebody said it today, identity should be a universal human right. You have over 1 billion people in the world. They have 0 identity documents. This is a monumental travesty of justice that can be solved. And if it can be deployed by nonprofits on the ground in refugee camps, you've got so many. Can you get any kind of benefit? It's hard to do anything without an identity, and it can also become a universal basic income platform where, lift people out of poverty if they give them an identity first, then connect them to digital banking. So that's really what we're hoping to do as one of our.
That's excellent. That's excellent. No, and I think is it ABT Banks in Canada has been using verifiable credentials to reach out to and sort of onboard the underserviced in finance into the financial system so that they can access the kind of, key resources for functioning in a society. But there are huge opportunities. And, I was actually in May, I was at a forum in Switzerland for the launch of a sort of, kind of digital identity for human rights. And so everybody is beginning to see this approach, this architecture, this decentralized architecture as a massive evolutionary step forward, one that kind of, brings about profound security and privacy solutions and enables this kind of frictionless authentication. So, but, I'm just the moderator. So I do want, we have 2 minutes left.
Put that in the chat, please, that conference.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll closing statements first. Will, then Chase.
I'm probably going to sound like a Chase fanboy here, but
we're all Chase fanboys.
Yes,
I'm just so sorry, but your work has influenced me for years. But you did a post, I don't know, a week or 2 ago. You're out in the farm in Texas. It was 106 degrees. You're on the tractor, and you're talking about how hard it is. And that towards the end, you look up at the camera and go, and you're addressing business leaders, and you'd say, just do the work. Just do the work. Unless you have roll up your sleeves and actually do the work, stuff is not going to get done. So to the question of how are we going to get there and slow, painful progress, to business leaders on the call, I would just say that there is a business model to trust, and especially when you combine, these 2 architectures we've been talking about for this call. Do a little research, do the work, reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want to explore a little bit more, but just do the work. And, thanks again, Chase, for all you've done for me and helping my knowledge and what you give back to the world.
Oh, well, thanks. Really kind of you. And I appreciate Indicio inviting me on. I think my only 2 cents here really is you have a choice. It's not often you actually have a very clear choice in business and technology. You either continue to engage in stuff that we know has categorically failed and is going to lead towards further problems, or you change the approach and begin to go forward. You know, I've been recently telling folks that it's the Deadpool problem. You know, if you know anything about how Ryan Reynolds got that movie made, he spent his own money, he put it in place, he got that rolling, people laughed him out of the room. Now it's one of the highest rated movies in the history of cinema, highest grossing. So stay the course, do the work, know where you're going, understand the vision, and things happen on the far end.